We're using Matilda's View Details page to take a look at using SQL injection with union statements. Basically, the way unions work is you can take the results from two totally different tables and stack them on top of one another, making one long list of records returned. So in the first table, we could say select ABC from food. Then we could have another query, select DEF from bar. Now, if we put a union statement between these, the records would be returned ABC with those columns, and then the second query would return all the records with columns DEF in them, and we would get one long query result back. A and D would be in the same column, B and E would be in the same column, and C and F would be in the same column. Now, in order for a union to work, you must select the same number of fields from each query, and you also must have the same data type respectively in each column. For example, B and E would need to be the same data type, or at least be castable to one another to where the data types are interchangeable. The problem we have here is that even though we know there's SQL injection, what we don't know is how many columns does the original table supposed to return, and what are their data types? Well, we can get around the second problem easily. Null values have a data type of any, and in other words, they're castable to any data type. It's kind of like the same way saying an integer is castable to a string and vice versa. Null is castable to any data type, though, making it much more versatile. Additionally, we can figure out how many columns are returned by simply trying each number of columns in turn methodically. So, let's get started. We use a union, select, null, double dash for a comment, and a space. The single quote's going to close off the username that we're searching for. Then we're going to do a union and select one column from our second table, our table, and then the double dash is going to get rid of any part of the query that would have included searching for this password. We're going to save this so we don't have to type it in again, and hit view details. And there's an error. We didn't line up the number of columns correctly. So now we're going to say comma null and save this and hit enter. We still get an error. Let's try 3 columns. And let's try 4 columns. And on we go. Okay, this time a record was returned. Now we know there's 4 columns. Now we don't know the data types, but we can figure that out. More importantly, what we need to know is where does the first field output on the page, the second field, the third, and so on. Let's put a 1 in the first field spot. 1s are pretty castable to most data types. Not all, but they can be varchars and so on and so forth. That doesn't appear to have output anywhere. Let's put a 1 in the second column. And it looks like the second field maps to username. That can be useful. Let's try the third field. Maps to password. And just by process of elimination, the fourth field probably maps to signature. And it does. So now we know the union is going to work, and we know which of those columns will output data. Let's try to put this to actual use. See if we can get the database version from the database, and also figure out what kind of database it is. If it's MySQL, we can just put in the function version, and that should work. If that doesn't work, we'll see if it's a MySQL server. We'll use something like add identity, which would help us identify an SQL server. So we'll try version first, see if that works. Well, as it turns out, it is a MySQL server. The version function worked, and we can see the version printed in the username field. So we know how to use the union, we know how to figure out how many columns there are, and we know how to map the columns to the output on the page so we can use that to extract data. And that's the basics of a union SQL injection.